you start by briefly telling us what Daniel Isn't Real is about?
Yeah, it's about a 19-year-old kid named Luke who comes from a traumatic childhood, and his imaginary friend that he had when he was a little kid comes back to him to try to help him live a little bit better and bring some energy and some courage into his life. And things go along pretty well for him for a minute, and then the imaginary friend Daniel starts to sort of try to take over his life, and it becomes a very harrowing situation.
The movie is based on Brian Deleu's novel, In This Way, I Would Say. How did you and Brian meet and come together and then decide to make the movie?
Yeah, I guess it was about 7.5 years ago that we first met. I was doing music videos at the time, and I was looking for a way to try to make a movie. I was writing a lot of scripts. I was reading books, looking to find material. And I met Brian at a party in Los Angeles. He had just moved there from New York, and he told me he'd written a novel, and I just really liked him. I kind of just clicked with him from the first moment that I met him. So I read the novel that weekend, and I called him up at the beginning of the week, and I said, hey man, like, I would love to try to turn this into a movie. And he said, well, I just moved here, and I'm interested in getting into screenwriting, so why don't we collaborate? So we started writing the script together, and the collaboration worked really well. And along the way, we made a much smaller movie together first called Some Kind of Hate that helped lead us to be able to make this movie. And we've now written, including the 2 movies we've made, we've written 4 movies together. So it's been a relationship that's been really, really easy going for us to work together.
Beneficial for both sides.
Yeah.
Carry on with other projects too. That's cool. What are some of the biggest differences between the movie and the book?
In the book, the entire thing is narrated by Daniel. It's all from his point of view and in his voice, which is very different way of looking at the world than what the movie is, which is all from Luke's point of view. And so there's a lot more time spent in sort of uncovering the layers with which Daniel sees the world, and sort of his indifference to certain kind of human experiences. And a lot of those ideas wound up changing in the movie, but there was a really interesting foundation of who that character could be. And I think that there's also, I guess in the movie, there's kind of a cosmic horror element that doesn't exist in the book. That was something as we sort of worked on making it cinematic and bringing out the kind of things that I was interested in visually and thematically. It expresses itself in a way that whereas in the book it keeps it very close to the characters.
There's nothing better than making impact right away in the movie. So your film opens in a very Martyrs type of way. Can you explain why you wanted to hit the audience with that right off the bat?
Yeah. And without spoiling what you're saying, it's true.
You don't have to go into
but it's good to know that within the first 60 seconds or so of the movie, like you're in trouble. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is because it's a movie that's about trauma, the traumatic origin, psychological traumatic origins for the characters, and so it in service of that, the movie had to begin in a traumatic way, and so it goes very quickly from something mundane to something exceptionally horrible, and then back to mundane again, and sort of back and forth to see how characters you can be existing in the world peacefully, and then suddenly something horrible can happen. So that was important thematically. And then also I don't like the trend in movies, in I guess what we call horror movies, where the first 15 minutes are the family. Oh, it's this family, everything's great, they're eating cereal, they're eating big, they're in the kitchen, they're in the new house, and then slowly something creepy happens. I find that structure to be tiresome, and needed to find a completely different structural way into the story.
Well, I can appreciate that. I liked it. I liked what had happened in that. I liked the Martyrs. I liked that surprise, right off the front. Because, sometimes you sit down for the movie and you're like, oh, okay, here it comes, and you kind of like that piece. But then when something happens right away, you're like, okay, now I got to pay attention. Now it's happening.
Yeah, I think that's right. And then the next 7 or 8 minutes in the movie also move incredibly fast, and you're seeing sort of a part of the character's story almost as if you're sort of remembering it in a fever dream, and so we really have to get your attention right away. If you're settling down and eating your popcorn and trying to find your seat, like, you're gonna miss a lot of stuff. I mean, it's funny, you come into this movie 60 seconds late, and you're never quite gonna get what happens at the ending of the movie.
Exactly.
You know?
And yeah, exactly. It turns out to be very important as the movie goes
Yeah.
on. It's not just you just did that to frighten everybody to start. It's a very important scene later on.
Yeah.
So it comes together. So you kind of touched on it, but at first the movie seems just okay, it's an imaginary friend kind of thing, but then it turns to what you said: tragedy, mental illness, struggles of growing up, a lot of different issues.
Mm-hmm.
How difficult was it to cover all that in one story, one movie?
I mean, it was difficult in the sense, like, it took us a long time to get the script right and to do it right, but I think that all of the themes, all of the different things that it's about flow very naturally from sort of the central idea. So if you start with the idea of what the imaginary friend is, and the idea that we're trying to be good people, but there's a voice in our head or some kind of darkness that pushes us in another direction, I think that's something that's very relatable, and you can examine that in a lot of different ways and expand on it, which is what I was trying to do with this, to expand on that one idea, and the idea that we start with these little kids, and then as it goes on, the idea of innocence and childhood sort of decaying, and that feeds into the look and the feel of everything in the whole movie. So I think that to me, once you really understand what your movie is about, and you remain true to that all the way through, you can go very, very big or very cosmic or very small and psychological, but it's still about the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, it almost seems like he's forced to grow up really quickly.
Yeah.
It's maybe because of the imaginary kid, just how the story is, but it just seems like he's just forced to really grow up and forced with a lot of issues very quickly.
Yeah.
Because the film covers some sensitive issues, did you ever have fear of going too far with any of them?
No, I don't think I feel like if we remain truthful to what it was about, then it shouldn't be a problem. And more importantly, I kept focusing on being empathetic. Like, if the movie is empathetic to the characters, if they are struggling, especially in Luke's case, he's struggling to be somebody who cultivates empathy despite what's going on with him, then I felt like then it's ethical in what it's dealing with.
Sometimes when you watch a film, and for me, watching your film, sometimes when you watch other films, it takes you a while to really get into the characters and see the actors become their roles, but for some reason your characters and your actors seem to grab their characters right away.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how that cast came together and worked so perfectly?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. The moment that Miles is on screen, you immediately start to feel for him, and he has something very lovable and relatable and expressive, and part of it was a very extensive process of finding the right people for it, and so there's something that happens when you meet somebody and you are exactly the right person, and part of it was we had a pretty intensive rehearsal period, so we spent about a week with all of the actors getting to know each other and working together and going through the whole script, and especially with special attention to Miles and Patrick getting to know each other and spend time together, and to because when we see them as adults, they're playing people who knew each other as kids, and so it was really, we needed to spend enough time together to sort of cultivate a sense of history between them, and they seemed to really enjoy playing off each other and living in that headspace.
Yeah.
And we would find stuff, when we would rehearse it, we'd find new little moments that hadn't been in the script that would maybe call back something they did when they were kids, or they started to sort of really imagine what it was like, and that was neat to watch that grow.
Yeah, it was like I said, it was even most of the characters in the book. Sometimes you always have that one personality that maybe didn't feel like they belonged.
Yeah.
Even the girlfriend that he kind of wanted, and all the girls. I mean, everybody in the movie felt like they
absolutely.
were the right person.
Yeah, it's important in casting. You don't You're not just looking for somebody who's good, but you're looking for somebody who belongs in the movie with everybody else. And I think, you know, Sasha Lane is such an incredible actress. I saw American Honey years ago that she stars in, and I immediately thought I need her to be in this movie. But she has the same kind of like intuitive, energetic life force that Miles uses, and she has something that works really interestingly in contrast with Patrick. So it all, you know, starts to take shape as like an ensemble. And they're all, you know, it's like they're all in the same movie. They're all working with each other and feeding off of each other's energy and not trying to sort of go off in their own direction.
So from your standpoint, watching that chemistry come together was probably pretty
It's
cool.
the greatest, yeah. It's absolutely the greatest. You know, I feel like the responsibility of a director is, first you're trying to like create visually the container for the movie, and then you're trying to fill it with the life force and help the actors to become sort of lifelike and spark together. And so they did that so beautifully.
Yeah, they're terrific. I mean, there are several times where Daniel and Luke kind of merged together. Were there any difficulties in pulling off the visual effects in those kind of scenes?
Well, not necessarily difficulty. It was exciting. I mean, there, you know, I don't want to spoil an effect, but there is a moment where I was thinking about how it was going to work, and what I decided that would be so important is let's glue their faces together, you know, and instead of doing certain aspects of it only digitally, we need to really have, you know, the modeled, you know, prosthetic things, attaching them together so that, because it's a movie about their inseparability, and so you really want to see the actors like physically struggling and having to deal with that. And our special effects, you know, makeup team came up with just like a brilliant design and a way to make that work. We had these things that, you know, took, I don't know, 8 hours to put on each of their faces, but then they could attach with magnets, and we could like stick them together to get these shots that would go on. And that sequence in the movie is probably about 10 seconds long. I shot 12 minutes of footage of them just glued together at different angles, and they were kind of, you know, making these noises like, and I was having, the producers eventually had to be like, okay, man, we got it, you got it.
move on.
Yeah. And it's like, you know, I don't totally like fetishize that everything has to be practical. I don't care that much about it. It's whatever works. But in things where you have actors like interacting with some crazy situation, it's awesome if you can have them, you know, with something they can touch and pull and stretch and interact with.
I thought it was an important thing to do, because sometimes when you see a movie with an imaginary character, you know, they're talking, or they're within a certain distance. Even in some movies, you don't even know they're imaginary till the end.
Yeah.
But this one goes the total opposite direction. You know that they're there, and then they eventually come together. So that was a very different, like, you really wanted to make sure that the audience saw that.
And that, I think that moment happens like pretty much exactly in the middle of the movie. So there's this moment when you're looking at the two of them getting physically closer and closer, and it's like exactly halfway. So maybe if you watch the movie backwards, it's like the same movie.
Yeah, I mean, I as the movie went on, I never imagined that happening. Like, it didn't dawn on me that was going to happen. But when it happened, it made total sense.
Yeah.
Because you could just follow the direction of the movie, going, you know, okay, just by the story, what's happening, and how each of them are kind of changing and reacting to each other. Speaking of reacting, have the audiences, the few audiences that have seen the movie so far, have they reacted in kind of the way you expected? Or?
It's been amazing. Like every single screening, you know, we first showed the movie at South by Southwest, and then we went to New Orleans, we've been to Dallas, we've been to Korea, we've been to Montreal, and then we've been here in Florida, and like every single time the audience has seemed to really get something out of the movie, like really deeply emotionally engage with it, be really like immersed by the feelings of it. And I've had a lot of people, you know, talking after the movie, and it seems like they have really been able to identify with the story. And it's so nice to do something that, you know, is, like I said, goes into this sort of cosmic direction, but seeing the way people react with it, I know that they're understanding how that's about an experience that we can all relate to. And so it's just been awesome. The people coming out to see the movie at these festivals are just amazing people who are so ready to like engage in this strange world.
Yeah, and there's so many different ways to interpret the movie.
Yeah.
And depending on your own, you know, it's one of those movies where, you know, you have a certain life experience. So when you see it up on the screen, you're like, you know, I can relate with that, maybe not that as much, but whatever. And like you said, it is a growing up story, and obviously everybody has to grow up. So
Yeah.
there's obviously a connection, at least on some level, to begin with.
Yeah.
And so you can see how everybody has a different reaction to it. I think somebody asked a question yesterday, and I think you said, oh, so I haven't heard that before. Or something. So I was like, so every time you see, somebody else has a different thing, so that must be good too.
Yeah, it's pretty dense. There's a lot going on in the movie. There's a lot of sort of, symbolic reflections, and there's a lot of aside comments, and there's different characters, and you can grab onto different pieces of it and really work through it.
So what is it about horror that you love that makes you make a movie like this?
The thing that's super cool about horror that's really specific to it is that you can take, like, fears and anxieties that are basic that we have, the normal things that might cripple an individual with anxiety or fear, and then you can express that in this externalized way. You can express this in a way that has creatures and tendrils and black holes and all of these nightmarish imagery, but which is related to the way that we feel inside. And I think that when you're able to do that in a movie, that's like this really special way to use the negative things that we feel and try to make it feel a little bit better by seeing it in this greater, larger than life way.
And finally, what is next for Daniel Isn't Real, and what's next for you?
So the movie, we're going to keep going on this World Tour Festival action, which is exciting. I'm going to London in a week, and we're going to go to Spain. We've got some other places it's going to be showing at, and then it comes out December 6th. And when it comes out on December 6th, it'll be like in limited theater release, but also immediately available for pay TV and iTunes and downloads and that kind of thing. And then I guess 4 months after that, it'll be on Shudder exclusively for streaming. And I love Shudder; they're the perfect place for this. But that does mean, like, it won't be on Netflix. Do not be waiting by Netflix for this movie to come. You gotta get it. You gotta buy or rent it, or you gotta go on Shudder.
No, you went the right direction with Shudder. Shudder
They're the best.
Is really pulling in. They showed some of the movies that were here last year.
Yeah.
And some of the best movies that were here last year. So I can see the match perfectly.
Yeah.
And they're really building an audience. I do press releases for them, and everybody loves when I put out their press releases.
Yeah.
So you have a good source there. So what's next for you?
I'm still trying to figure that out. There's a movie I wrote that Spectre Vision again and I are really interested in working on together. They're the producers of this movie. We're trying to figure out if we can make that work. And I wrote another movie with Brian that we're interested in doing, and we'll see what happens.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sitting down.
Thank you. This was awesome.
Thank you.